the firm after a while can recognize that their decision in the past is wrong. They misperceive the actual price level and the expected price level. They realize that they miss some information, miss some important information, they make the wrong decision. So they turn back to its potential level. Okay, that is what you have learned in macro one. Okay, we already introduced the sticky weight theory, lý thuyết tiền lương cứng nhắc. We already studied the workers misperception theory, lý thuyết nhận thức sai lầm. All of these theories explain why the short run supply curve slope upward, but in long run it is vertical. Okay, so that is the idea of the ASID model. But as I mentioned, this model has some weakness that we couldn't explain. If we only restrict at this model, we couldn't explain this fact. The first, we couldn't explain the position of this curve. Okay, we couldn't explain why the average demand stay here, or why it shift to the right by a certain distance. Okay, or why the average supply curve is at this position. We couldn't explain that fact. And the second point, we couldn't explain the slope of this curve. Okay, why when it is slope, when it's flat, when it is steep, we couldn't explain that fact, because the slope of this curve is very important for economic analysis and for explaining economic fluctuation. Okay, if the curve is very steep, then actually the fluctuation of the economy would be very small. Okay, you can see here, if I take the supply curve very steep like this, then you can see a fluctuation of average demand have only small impact on the output. For example, here you can see here, if the demand curve steep to the left, actually the output will change by a very small amount, almost unchanged. Okay, so obviously the slope of this curve are very important for our economic analysis. Okay, for explaining economic fluctuation, but all of these we couldn't explain within the ASID model, and we also couldn't explain how the change in government spending or the money supply or the income tax affect the average demand across quantitatively. We only explain the direction of the movement. If we increase the government expenditure, then the average demand curve shift to the right. That is all we can explain in macro one. But obviously, we need more detailed answer. We want to quantify the distance that the average demand curve will shift to the right. It will shift to the right by 1 centimeter or 2 centimeter, or by how distant, what is the distance. We need to know exactly the distance of the shift. But the ASID model couldn't explain that fact. Okay, that is a problem. And in macro 2, we will analyze in detail. We will answer those questions. We identify the position of the average demand curve. We will see how the average demand curve shift will affect the actual output, and where is the position of the long run supply curve. How can we determine the potential output? Or what is the slope of the average supply curve? Is steep or flat? Depend on what? Okay, so there are something we can better explain in the in macro 2, in the intermediate macroeconomics. Okay, so for ISMM model, what would we do? What would ISMM model can help us explain for ASID model? Who can tell me what determines the slope of the average supply curve? Okay, in other words, in your opinion, if the market is highly competitive, how does the supply curve look like? Steep or flat, and why? Okay, I repeat my question. If the market is highly competitive, so the short run supply curve will be very vertical, very steep, like the vertical line like this, or it will be very flat, look like this curve. It will look like the green line, very flat, or it will be like the red line, very steep and wide. Okay. You have 2 or 3 minutes to think it, and then I will ask some of you to give the answer. If the market is highly competitive, all goods and service market in the economy are highly competitive, then the short run supply curve will be very steep like the red line, or will be very flat like the green line. And why? Okay. Okay. The first member in the class list, Miss Hoàng Phương Trang. Are you there?
In the short run, if in a competitive market, the average supply curve will flat because in a given price, the firm want to produce more.
What does a highly competitive market mean, and why it leads to the flatness of the supply curve?
In a highly competitive, which a given price, the firm want to produce more. It's
Why?
It not depend on the price.
You have studied microeconomics, and you know how many kind of market structure. Can you name?
They are competitive.
Yes, competitive market.
Competitive market. Monopolistic competition.
Yes.
And oligopoly and monopoly.
Yes, oligopoly and monopoly market. And which kind of market is highly competitive?
It's perfect competition market.
Yes, perfect competitive market or maybe monopolistic competitive market. They are very competitive. And what is the definition of this market? What are the definition of this market? How many sellers?
There are many sellers.
Yes, there are many sellers. And are they price taker or the price maker?
They are the price taker.
Yes, they are price taker. They had to take the given price. They couldn't change the price. Okay.
Yes.
So, in your opinion, in this market, the price is flexible or is inflexible?
The price is inflexible.
Why? Why when the market is competitive, then the price is inflexible? Inflexible means that the price will be fixed at that point for a long time. It will not change continuously. So why you think so?
I don't remember. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Okay. Okay, the next person, Miss Lê Thị Thanh Nga. Does your micro work?
Yes, really.
Okay, thank you. Glad to know that. Okay, can you tell me if the market is competitive, like perfect competitive, then the price is flexible or inflexible, and why?
I think the price is inflexible.
Why I think so?
Because in the perfect competitive market, the consumer have many choice to choose the firm. So I think that the price, if the firm can increase the price, so the consumer can choose another firm. So in some way, I think the price is fixed. So it, I think it's a line is vertical, not horizontal.
If the price is inflexible, then the curve is vertical or horizontal?
It's vertical.
Vertical. Vertical, it means that the price change a lot and output unchanged or
no horizontal. I'm sorry.
Horizontal. Okay. If the price is inflexible, then the curve would be horizontal.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your answer. The last person I would like to ask more, Mr. Viet, as you say.
You want to say that the price in the perfect competitive market is reflexible. Right?
Yes, yes. My question is that is flexible or inflexible in competitive market?
Inflexible. Like,
inflexible.
yes.
What? The same
like,
opinion?
Yes, like they are ngas.
Yes.
That's that the customer have many choice of firm and product. So yeah, product and so if someone make some firm that make the price higher than the average price that or equivalent price, then people will stop buying their product.
Yes. Okay, I have further question for you. In your opinion, what you observe in reality, the price of car or the price of vegetable are more flexible? Which price are more flexible? Price of car or motorbike, or the price of vegetable or flower?
You mean flexible, right?
Which is more flexible?
I think that is the vegetable flour.
Yes, the price of flower or price of vegetable are very flexible. You can see they can change quickly or maybe daily. If yesterday evening there big rain, heavy rain, then the price of vegetable this morning would be very high. Okay, but the price of car or motorbike, you can see they stay there for a very long time, maybe a few months or maybe even 1 year. They are unchanged. And in your opinion, which market is more competitive, car market or vegetable market?
Vegetable market.
Yes, vegetable market is more competitive. There are many sellers. For car market, we only can find few sellers in the market. Okay, thank you for your answer. Actually, the price is more flexible in the competitive market. Why? Because there are many sellers. So no firm can determine the market price. They couldn't fix the price as they want. The price depends on the market equilibrium. But you see that the demand and the supply curve can continuously change. Maybe tomorrow you have a higher income, we buy more. Maybe tomorrow there are some change in the market conditions that lead to a change in the market demand. Or maybe the weather condition and other factor production change. So tomorrow the supply, the total supply in the market will be affected. And when either supply or demand curve change, the market price will change. And therefore, all firms have to change the price accordingly. Okay? So the price will not be fixed in the competitive market. But for a monopoly, you can see that the monopoly is the only one seller in the market. And they will not change the price frequently. They will estimate the market demand, and they estimate that at that price they can maximize profit. So they will set their product at that price. And they will not change this price for a long time. They only change this price after a long period of time, maybe a few months, half a year, or maybe a few years, even a few years. Because after a long time, they can do another market research and they recognize that the market demand already changed. So I should set another price. Okay, that is a characteristic of the monopoly market. So remember that in the competitive markets, the price are very flexible. And in the monopoly market or non-competitive market, the price are sticky, are fixed, almost fixed, unchanged, inflexible. Okay. So that is the characteristic of the two curve of the slope of the supply curve. No, the flexibility of the price level. It depends on the competitiveness of the market. So now, if the market is very competitive and the price is very flexible, so how does the supply curve look like? It will be very steep, look like the vertical line, the red line. Why? Because when the price is flexible, it means that the price can go up or go down very easily. So you can see that the curve shoot very steep. It means that the price can change a lot. Okay. If you draw the supply curve like the horizontal line, then the price fixed there. Okay. For example, the price would be fixed at this point. Okay. Would be fixed at this point. It will not change, or it only move around this point at a very small scale, a very small range. Okay. But for the vertical lines, the price can change a lot. So that is the shape of the short run supply curve depending on the flexibility of the market, flexibility of the price level, and the competitiveness of the market. So turning back to this, the ISRM model, and you can see when the Industrial Revolution occurred in the early age, in the onset of the capital market, the capitalism system. Okay, all firms are very small. For example, in 1800, 19th century, 17th century, most firms are very small because the capitalism system just was born in that period of time, and therefore only small firm exist in the society. We haven't got any big firm at that time. So market at that time are very competitive. And therefore the supply curve look like the vertical line. And at that time, most economists such as Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and others, they believe that when the long run, when the supply curve is vertical or nearly vertical, then output is not affected by the demand side. You can see here, if I change the demand to the right or the left, and the supply curve is vertical, output is unchanged. Output still there. Okay, so the demand side is useless in the traditional economic thought, in the traditional economic theory. The only way to affect the actual output is to shift the supply curve like this. If we can shift the supply curve, then the output will change. Okay, the demand stay here, so output will change accordingly. And therefore, all economic policy focus on how to change the supply curve. It means that all economic policy focus on the supply side, how to increase the productivity of the firm, how to encourage the technology, how to increase the investment in machine, and so on. The demand side, they can forget, they can ignore, because it has no effect on the economy. But one big economic event occurred in 1929 to 1993, the Great Depression. At that time, you see that the actual output reduced a lot. Here's the diagram. This diagram can show you that. Yes. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Let me open other slide. Not this. Okay, let me show you this graph to illustrate the problem in 1929 to 1933. You can see here, this is the actual output of US from 1865 to 2000. Okay, and you can see here the economy do not follow the black line like this. The actual production is follows the green and the red light. Okay, the green area reflects the period of economic boom, the economic expansion. Okay, when we produce a lot and our standard of living is very high, or the number of jobs created is very large, something like that. And in the red area, the economy fall into a recession. Okay, it means that the actual production is much lower than before, much lower than its potential level. And from this diagram, you can easily find out that in the period from 1929 to 1933, the economy fall into a very, very serious depression. Okay, you can see many other economic recession like post-war recession, 1982 recession, 1990s recession, or 2008 recession, or now the recession due to the COVID-19 outbreak. But the scale or the length of this recession much smaller, much less severe than the Great Depression in 1929 to 1933. Okay, and what are the characteristics of this recession? As you can see, the ISID model. Obviously, according to the traditional economic theory or the classical economic theory, it's impossible to shift the supply curve to the left for a long time. Okay, maybe sometimes the supply curve can shift to the left due to the bad weather condition, due to some disease, of course. But those events only last for a short period of time. It couldn't happen for many years. And obviously, the impact of this couldn't be very large because it only occurs within a specific market, like a pig market or a beef market or chicken market, something like that. It couldn't happen as a wide range of the economy, wide scale of the economy. So obviously, in 1929 to 1933, the economic recession or depression couldn't be explained by the shift of the supply curve. Instead, in this period, the demand reduced a lot. You can see that before 1929, there was some problem in the banking sector of the US economy, and the money supply reduced. And as you can see, when we have less money, we will consume less. Firm will invest less. When the stock market go down, it means that we are less wealthier. The stock we own become cheaper, and therefore we have a less wealth. And when you feel you are poorer, your wealth reduce, so you will consume less. And therefore the aggregate demand in this period reduced. But according to the classical theory, if we shift the demand curves to the left, if we, oh, sorry. Okay. If we shift the average demand curve to the left like this, and the supply curve is vertical, then output couldn't be changed or only changed by a small amount. It couldn't, the actual output couldn't reduce as much as what we observe in reality. So it means that there is something wrong about the slope of the supply curve. It's not vertical like this. According to the Keynes, who introduced the new way of thinking about how the economy works, very famous economy, John Maynard Keynes. He thinks that the supply curve is flat like this. It's not vertical like that, like what we explained before. So why? He explained that in 1920 decades, after 2 centuries of competition, some firms can work more efficiently and they dominate the market. They become a larger company and they can kick other business out of the market. And some firms can merge together, okay, to become a bigger firm. So it can work more efficiently. Okay, it means that in 1920 decades, the market is not highly competitive as before, as 2 centuries before. Instead, it become more non-competitive or become more monopolist. Okay, and when the market become more monopolistic, then, as we explained, the price would be inflexible. Firm now can make its own price, and it will fix the price at a certain level for a long period of time, and therefore the supply curve now will be very flat. And when the supply curve is very flat like this, then you can see the average demand plays very important role. For example, the demand curve shift to the left like this. You can see that the output will change a lot. Okay, the output will reduce by very far distance from the initial level. Okay, so that is the reason why John Maynard Keynes highly appreciate the role of the average demand in the economy. He said that the average demand is very important for the economy in short run. In long run, he agrees that the supply curve would be vertical, but he said that we all die in long run. It means that if you analyze long run, it's useless. It is not meaningful at all, because what we care is the actual production today. And the actual production today depends on the short run supply curve, not the long run supply curve. And because the short run supply curve is very flat, very horizontal, then the demand side is very important. Okay, so we have to focus more on the demand side. So the opinions of Keynes and classical economics is completely opposite to each other. Okay, one side, demand side is not important at all. The other side, demand side is completely important. Okay, demand is all about story, not the supply. Okay, so that is the idea. And in the ISNM model, we use this assumption of the John Maynard Keynes. The supply curve in our model is horizontal like this. The price is inflexible. Okay, and therefore the demand side plays an important role. And now what we do is just to focus on the demand side. Okay, we have to identify what determines the average demand, what is the position of average demand, and when any change, for example, government spending change or income tax change, how does the aggregate demand shift, okay, quantitatively. We have to quantify the shift of the aggregate demand curve, okay. So that is the point, the idea of this model. And in this model, we have a big assumption that the economy is closed. Of course, as you study in macro 1, normally the economy is opened. Okay, for most economy in the world, it is open. We have a export and import. But for simplicity, now we assume that the economy is closed, so we can better understand how the model works. In the next chapter, when we study the Mundell-Fleming model, we will extend this ISNM model to take the foreign market into account, and then we have a full model for sector, okay, including the net export. So that is the assumption of this model, and actually this assumption also very applicable or very practical in 1920 decades, because in 1920 decades you see that most economy did not open their market to foreign competitor, or only open within a very small scale. Okay, so actually the foreign sector plays very small role in the market. So actually we can ignore this sector. Okay. So now let's see how this model works. This model consists of two equations, IS equation and NM equation. IS stand for what? IS stand for investment equals saving, and NM stand for liquidity equal money supply. Okay, so now let's start with the IS equation. As you can see, okay, as you can see in the slide, this slide I already explained or I mentioned before, but less detailed than what I said. So this is a characteristic of the Great Depression in 1929 to 1933. Low demand. Low demand, it means that the aggregate demand is deficient, in other words. And as a result, low production and high unemployment. And all economic theory before failed to explain why this recession can occur, because they assume the supply curve is vertical. And John Maynard Keynes, very famous macroeconomics, he wrote this book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, in 1936. And in this textbook, he tried to explain why the recession occurs. The recession occurs because the price now is sticky. The price is sticky because the market become more monopolistic, okay, less competitive. And when the price is sticky, it means that the short-run supply curve is very flat or horizontal, and therefore the output is completely determined by AD, aggregate demand side. Okay. And now, as we learn, aggregate demand is the sum of four components: household consumption, firm investment, and government expenditure, and net export. That is what you learn in macro 1. And therefore, in notation, we can denote AE stand for aggregate demand or aggregate expenditure, C for household consumption, I for firm investment, G for government expenditure, X for export, and minus imports, IN. Okay, that is what we study in macro 1. But now we assume that the economy is closed. Closed means that export and import we can neglect in our model. We can put them aside. So the left is C plus I plus G. That is the total spending, total expenditure of the economy. Okay. The demand for Vietnamese goods and services come from the household, our household consumption, our firm investment spending, and our government purchase. And this diagram can give you an image of how the economy relate to each other. Here we have three sectors: household sector, business sector, and government sector. Okay, and how they interact with each other. You can see that the business sector have to hire household to work for them. So the business sector have to pay salary to the household, to the worker, have to pay rent to the landlord, also household. They have to pay the interest income to the capital owner, who we have a saving, our household have saving, and we lend money to the firm, okay, through the financial market, and therefore the firm have money to buy machine and equipment, and therefore they have to pay interest to us, okay, and the firm have profit. And the household sector, after having money from salary, from interest income, from the rent income, they will use this amount of money for three purposes. First, they have to pay tax to the government. Okay, they have to pay tax to the government, and they use the left for consumption. Okay, but they don't fully consume all of their income. They don't consume all of their income. They only consume a part, and the rest they will use for saving. And saving will be deposited in the commercial bank, will be lent to the bond market, or will be invested in the stock markets. Okay, and this amount of saving come to the business sector. The firm will go to the commercial bank, will go to the stock market to raise funds for their business. Okay, the government, after collecting the tax from the household, they have money, and they will use this amount of money to buy goods and services from the business sector. Okay, and the business sector itself, from their profit, from their borrowings, they will buy machines. Okay, so that is a picture of the economy, how they relate to each other. Okay, and of course, the inflow and the outflow all the way equal to each other. Okay, the household income must be equal to the sum of household consumption, saving, and tax. The government income from tax and borrowing from the household sector must be equal to the government purchase. Okay, the firm's borrowing investment should be equal to the saving from household, and after lending to the government, the rest will be equal to the firm's investment. Okay, so that is the picture of the economy. And now there's a question for you. To understand how aggregate demand is determined, okay, we have to understand each component, how each of these components determined. What determines household consumption, what determines firm investment, what determines government spending, and then we know what determines the aggregate spending, aggregate expenditure. And then combining with the output, we can identify the equilibrium. Okay, so my first question for you, can you tell me some factors affecting household consumption? Very simple question. Can you tell me some factors affecting the household consumption? You have 3 minutes to think of, and then I will ask some of you to give the answer. Dạ, nhờ bạn trả lời giúp nhé. Okay, the next person, Miss Nguyễn Thị Hạnh.
The household consumptions. Well, it's either electricity or gas or everything that the people need to spend every day.
My question is that, can you name some factors that affect our household consumption? For example, your family spending. What determines the amount of money that your family spend on goods and service?
The income.
Yes, the first important factor is income, our family's income. What else?
And the price on the market.
The price of goods and service, exactly.
I think the policies of the government.
For example?
For example, the government will increase the demand of the people. Like they will have some policy that
which policy to increase the household demand?
I forgot the in English, so I think it's in Vietnamese giá trần or giá sàn.
Okay, the ceiling price and floor price.
Yeah.
In ceiling price will affect the household spending. Okay. What else?
I feel about the tax.
How the tax affect?
Well, if they increase the tax, they will, then the people will have less money and they will spend less.
Okay, if the government impose a higher income tax, then the household will have less income to take home and therefore they will consume less. Exactly. One more factor.
And maybe they want to invest more and the interest of the market. If the interest increase, they will invest more and spend less.
The household will save more in the bank and they will spend less. Okay, yeah. Exactly. Okay, thank you for your answer. Okay, so some important factors that Ms. Hạnh had mentioned include the income of our family, the price of goods and service, overall goods and services, and the policy of the government, such as the price ceiling of ceiling price and floor price, and the tax policies. If the government imposes a higher tax, then we consume less. And the interest rate. If the interest rate is so high, then instead of consumption, we will save to earn interest, high interest, and therefore spending will be less. Okay. Another person, let's think of other factors that can affect your family spending. At least 2 or 3 important factors for 2 or 3 other important factors you can mention. Okay, Mr. Tuấn Anh.
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Can you have any other factor besides what Mr. Hein mentioned.
So other factors beside the price, the income, and the tax of the government, right?
Yes, interest rate on
And interest rate. And there are still other factors that can affect the demand of of the family of the household.
yes.
Well, let me see. Well, actually that's all I can think of. I cannot think of anything else other than that.
Oh, I have suggestions for you. Where you come from? What is your home country? Home province. Where do you come from?
Where am I come from? Like,
Which province? Which province do you come from?
I'm come from Trường Mỹ, Hà Tây Phú, and Hanoi now.
Okay. So, do you want to live in Hanoi, in central Hanoi in the future?
Actually, if that's for my job, I would like to, but I enjoy the life here.
You enjoy the life here than living in Trường Mỹ?
No, I'm enjoy the life here that I am living in Trường Mỹ rather than living in Hanoi in the future.
In the future, if you have two positions, working in Chiang Mai and working in central of Hanoi, where should you choose, the central or the Chiang Mai?
Oh, well, I would say that I'll choose Trường Mỹ. I don't know. I'll choose Hanoi. Yeah.
Okay, let me tell you a story of my friends, the true story. I have a group of close friends.
Yes.
After graduating in 2002, we have a job, but the salary of ours are quite different. The middle level of income is around 4 million at that time, 3 to 4 million at that time, and the person who has the highest income is around 18 million, 6 times than the other people. Okay, and normally at the end of the week, at the weekend, we often go out to have a drink with each other. And
yeah,
one member of our group many times volunteer to pay two members. Many times volunteer to pay money for all, for the party on that day, for the meal on that day, or the drink on that day. And it's cost maybe 1 million for a group of 6 or 7 persons. But it's very surprising that 2 persons who volunteer to pay money for others are not the highest income people, are not the 2 people who have the highest income. Their income is only at the normal level, only around 3 or 4 million. Contrastly, the 2 persons who have the highest income at that time, they never volunteer to pay money for the other people. He only accept to he only pay as the when we divide the spending for all member, equally divide the bill for all member. Okay, so can you explain for that fact why 2 persons who have highest income rarely volunteer to pay money for others, but 2 persons who have normal or low level income volunteer to pay for the other people?
well, I would say that the 2 people who were willing to pay, they are more generous than people who have the highest income level.
Yeah, the 2 guys so mean.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Can you explain why those 2 people are so generous? Because our character depends on something. Okay, it couldn't fall from the sky. It must come from our life, our social life. So can you guess what explain for the generosity of these 2 persons?
Well, I think the generosity of the 2 person, they come from, the environment they were raised in, or some kind of subjective factors that come from inside these people, not from the not be affected by the government or the market or something like that.
Yes. Can you find out which environment can more easily make people more generous?
Well, it's really hard to think.
No, not hard to think. It's very simple. You can see your friend out around you. You can easily recognize that.
If they live with well, I think that these all partly come from if they are living with like the people living around them, they are generous, and then they they get affected by these people, and you know, in a small community they share that generosity with each other. Or you know, the meaner people, they live with in a community that, you know, everyone does not share share everything with each other, and then you know, that will eventually become a habit or some kind of personal trait. Yeah, that's the people living around you, or also the generosity of the people living around you.
Yes, generosity of people living around you can affect to your generosity.
Yes.
More specifically, how is your family? That can more easily make you generous.
Yes, family is the most important factor that will affect you know, a person's trait.
And which family tend to be more generous?
A family. Well, this question is really difficult to answer. Like, you're asking me what, like, which kind of family is like tend to be more generous?
In your opinion, Phạm Nhật Vượng more generous or be more generous? Who are more likely?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Who was born in Phạm Nhật Vượng family, or my child more generous than Phạm Nhật Vượng child or grandchildren?
Well, I think Phạm Nhật Vượng is more generous.
Why? Why think so?
Because he earned a lot of money, and he also used the money on community projects or something like that that gives out to the society.
Yeah.
So that I think he's more generous.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Actually, what I want you to give the answer is that the generosity of ours depend on the living condition that we have experienced, on the wealth of our family. If our family is wealthier, we are richer, then we are more likely to be generous. More likely is not always true, but more likely to be generous. Turning back to my friend's story, why those two friends of mine are very frequently volunteer to pay money for other people, even their income is low, because he was born in a not very rich, but quite rich family. Their house located on the Tràng Thi Street and another on the Thụy Khuê Street, and the value of their house maybe $1 or $2 million at that time. Today it can be 100 billion Vietnam đồng or $5 million. But at that time it's around 20 or 30 billion Vietnam đồng. It means equivalent to $2 million. So with if you know that you have a rich or large amount of assets, so even your income today is not very high, you still be confident to consume. Okay.
Yes.
But the other two persons who have very high income, but they are not willing to spend much, because most of them come from Nam Định. Okay, and you see that the big challenge for people who want to live in Hanoi. That is what I want to ask you. Why do you want to live in Hanoi in the future? The big challenge for a person after graduating, if they want to live in Hanoi, is to buy a house. To own a house is a big challenge for people who want to stay and work in Hanoi. And then you see, to buy a house in Hanoi is not cheap. It's very costly. You have to pay, for example, today, you have to pay around 3 billion Vietnam đồng. And let's see, assuming that today your income is very high, 40 million Vietnam đồng per month, very, very high. Okay, for a young labor from 23 to 30, 35 to earn 40 million Vietnam đồng is a big challenge. Okay, very high income. But let's assume that. So 40 million, and if you consume around 10 or 50 million per month, so you have 20 or 25 million left. 25 million left, it means that after 1 year, you have around 300 million. Okay, 300 million. So it takes you around 10 years to have enough money to buy a house in Hanoi. Very, very long time. But you know that to keep a job which pay you 40 million for 10 years, it's not easy at all. Okay, you can get that job today, but that position is very competitive. If you don't work very efficiently, the other people will take your position. So actually, that is a problem. So two friends from Nam Định, they can earn a lot, but they know that they have nothing, no saving. Their parents are much poorer than the other friends' parents, so they have to save. So that is another factor very important affecting our household consumption is the wealth. If we are we are poor in wealth, we don't have saving, we don't have wealth, any valuable assets, then even you have high income, you don't consume too much. But if you have not very high income, but you have a large amount of wealth, then you can be confident to consume a lot. Okay, you can buy a luxury product, even your income is not very high. That is the point. Okay, another factor also affect, and turning back to the wealth, and that explains why sometimes in some periods we can consume a lot, even our income unchanged. That is when the stock market boom. When the stock market boom, the price of stock go up. It means that most investors in the market become richer. Okay, the price of the stock ACB that I buy a few years ago is only 18,000, and now its price jumped to 33,000. It means that my wealth almost double after a few years. It means that I'm richer. Okay, for example, if I buy 500 million, so now I have 500 million more. I assume so, not exactly number, but that I assume. Okay, so obviously I'm richer, so I will consume more. I can buy a new motorbike, a new car, or a new cell phone, for example, something like that. Okay, that is a very important factor explaining the change in our household consumption. And another factors affecting the household consumption. In your opinion, during last year, from the beginning of 2020 up to now, your family tend to spend more or less than usual, and why? In your opinion, your family spending during last year, 2020, tend to be higher or lower than usual, and why? Very realistic question. Okay, so next person, Miss Thu Phương. You can think for a while and give the answer. You don't have to answer immediately if you haven't got the idea.
I think in the last year, our family consumption is decreased.
Yes, that happened to most family in Vietnam. Why?
The first reason is that we spend more time to stay at home.
Yes.
So the money that we spend for eating out or go to a commercial center is decreased.
Yes.
The second is that the income of our family will also decrease.
Yes, the income decrease, the more isolated environment, so we don't have a chance to consume. Any other reason?
The goods in the local area is less than before.
Yes.
But the transaction is limited.
Okay, it comes from the isolation. Okay, the isolated environment. In your opinion, your family expectation about the future is good or bad? Your family expectation about income, about other thing, about job, is good or bad?
It's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. Because when you have low income today, I consume less because my low income today. But for my case, my income actually not decrease. It stay the same. Okay, because you still go to the university, so my income unchanged. But the bad expectation occur in the society. All people feel pessimistic about the future of the economy. So I couldn't get out of that trend. I also feel pessimistic. So even my income unchanged, but I have bad expectation about the future. Maybe my job tomorrow is not good, or maybe other outside job is not good, extra job is not good. And maybe my income can be lower in the future if in the future less students go to the university. So what would I do? What would I do today if I have bad expectation about my job in the future? I will consume more or less. Less, of course. Okay. So there are some factors. Okay, thank you, your answer. So there are some factors affecting the household consumption you can name. Okay. First is your family's income. Second is price level. Third is household wealth, household assets. Fourth is our expectation about the future. Fifth is the market interest rate. Okay, it will make our borrowing become more or less expensive, or our saving more efficient, more beneficial or less beneficial. It depends on the policy of the government. We pay more tax or less tax. We less more subsidy from the government or less subsidy from the government. Okay, okay, so there are some factors affecting the household consumption. Okay. We can list many factors, but in our model, our ISNM model, household consumption equation is very is simplified. It depends on only two factors. That is the income, the current income, and the tax. You can see the equation household consumption here. Household consumption equals the sum of a minimum level of consumption. We call it as C subscript 0. Autonomous consumption, tiêu dùng tự định. Autonomous consumption can be understood as the minimum consumption, amount of consumption. This amount of consumption may be for food, for shelter, for some very basic goods and services we must have to survive. Okay. And the additional consumption depend on the after-tax income. Okay. After-tax income equals the income denoted by Y minus the income tax denoted by T. Okay. That is the income we take home. And the parameter to reflect the relationship between household consumption and after-tax income is denoted by MPC. MPC stands for marginal propensity to consume, xu hướng tiêu dùng biên. And MPC should be smaller than 1 and greater than 0. Who can tell me why? MPC, the parameter reflecting the relationship between household consumption and after-tax income, should stay in the range from 0 to 1. Okay, you have 1 or 2 minutes to think of, and then I will ask some of you to give the answer. Okay. Please tell me why MPC stay from 0 to 1. Miss Diệu Thúy.
Oh well, can I answer this question, please?
Okay.
Yeah, it's ranging from 0 to 1 because Y minus T is the disposable income of a family, right? So
Yeah.
if the marginal propensity to consume, it must be less than what the amount of money that a family that have in their hand to consume, and it's also have to be greater than 0 because you know, outside you know, beside the autonomous consumption, the family has, you know, they have to pay for other things as well, so that you know, the MPC must be you know, greater than 0 and lower than 1.
Okay, thank you for your answer tonight. Okay, as you can see, when you have a higher income, you tend to consume more or less. More, of course. Okay, so obviously MPC should be greater than 0, showing the positive relationship. Okay, it's quite understandable. But why is smaller than 1? Because normally when you have more income, you will not use up of your income, your additional income for consumption only. You only use a part of your additional income for consumption, and the rest you will use for saving. Okay. For example, if someone give me 1 million more, I couldn't use all 1 million to buy goods and service. I only consume 700,000, and the other 300,000 I use for my saving, and therefore the additional consumption should be smaller than the additional income. So MPC should be smaller than 1. Okay, so that is the reason why this parameter stay in the range from 0 to 1. And here is a saving equation, a saving function. It is a left after, is the left of income after we pay for the income tax and household consumption. Okay, and rearranging and substituting C equation into this equation, you can get this equation. Saving equals minus autonomous cost spending plus 1 minus MPC. 1 minus MPC, we can denote MPS, marginal propensity to saving, time 1 minus T, Y minus T after tax income. Okay, so that is the household consumption. Okay, that is the household consumption we use in our model. In the more practical model, we can add the interest rate variable into the model. Maybe 1 century ago, in 1920 decades, the interest rate is not very important for household consumption, because at that time the personal or the individual credit or private credit is not very popular. Not many families borrow money from the bank to buy something. But today is quite different. Many families in Vietnam, they use a credit from the bank. We can have the credit card, that is typical tool for accessing the credit from the bank. Many families borrow money to buy a house. Many families borrow money to buy a car. Okay, owning a car, not many people have full money, enough money to own a car, but they also use the external fund, the borrowing to buy a car, external finance. Okay, so it's quite popular in the modern society. So obviously, interest rate become more important today because you only borrow if you know the interest rate is low. Okay, and therefore the interest rate can have a large impact on consumption today, but not 1 century ago. But let's ignore this factor temporarily. In the future, if we want to make the model more complicated, you can add other variable into the model. It's quite not very difficult. It's not very complicated. Just adding new variables that you think is more important. But the way we analyze nearly unchanged. Okay. Okay, so that is the first equation in the aggregate expenditure. After break, we will continue with the investment spending and government purchase. Okay, so now you have 50 minutes for break, and after that we will come back. Okay, so let's continue. So now we already finished the first component in aggregate expenditure, that is household consumption. We explain some determinant of these factors, spending. Okay, and now we come to the second type of spending in our model, the investment spending. Who can tell me some factors that will affect the decision of investment spending of firms when a firm decide to invest more? Okay, you can think for a while and then I ask some of you to give the answer. Okay, so Hạnh Trang, can you tell me some factors that affect the firm investment decision?
Well, I think the first factor is interest rate.
Yes. How like interest rate affect the?
When the interest rate is higher, the quantity of investment is lower than.
Yes. They have the negative relationship. Okay. Any other factors?
Um, the next factor is economic growth.
Yes, economic growth. How the economic growth affects?
I think that when the economic meets the decrease, the demand is decreased too. So they will invest less to to
Yes.
to
When the
meet the
economy,
demand.
yes, when the economy go down, okay, we consume less, so have no reason to invest more. Okay, that is the economic prospect. Okay, any other factors?
And the availability of their finance.
Yes, the availability of finance. If finance is more available, then investment
Will increase.
yes, will be more. Any other factor?
The state of their technology.
Okay, the state of the technology.
Well, I just think of those.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Very good answer. Okay, so obviously investment decision depend on many factors that your friend already mentioned. The first and most important factor is the economic condition. When the current and future economic condition is good, it means that today's economy perform well and you also have a good expectation about the future of the economy. So you have some reason to invest more. Okay, because you know that the consumer will buy more in the future. So obviously I should expand my business. I should equip more machines. I should expand my restaurant, my factory. So in the future, I can increase my production capacity to meet a higher demand. Okay, that is the first factor, the economic condition currently and the future. The second important factor is the availability and the cost of fund. The cost of fund is the interest rate. If you can access the credit very easily at a lower cost, so you have a high incentive to invest more because the borrowing cost is so cheap. Okay, so that is the second group of factors. Another factors is the technology. And you can see when there is a new way of new technology, many firms have incentive to invest and to equip the machine equipment using this new technology. For example, if there is a new improvement in the software industry, in software product, for example, we don't use Windows 10 and now we have Windows 20, for instance, and the chip of the laptop can be fastened more, then many firms can have incentive to invest in the computer system because they can take advantage of the speed of both software and hardware. Okay, so that is the third factor, the state of technology. Another factor is the tax policy of the government. If the firm get more tax incentive from the government, it means that the government reduce the tax for the firm if they invest more in a new machine, in a more friendly environment friendly technology, or if they invest in the distant areas, or if they invest in some specific industries that the government want to encourage to develop. For example, the car using electricity, or the solar energy technology, for example, so on. Then the firm have incentive to invest more because they can take advantage of the tax policy from the government. Okay, so there are some factors that can affect the firm investment decisions. But once again, in our simple model, investment function is also simplified. Investment function in our model only depend on the interest rate denoted by R. Okay. Why does the model not take other factor into account? Because this model is to analyze the short run problem, and in short run, the state of technology, the economic condition, the future economic condition in the future, and the tax policy from the government and so on, they almost unchanged. Okay, and because they unchanged, it means that they will not affect the investment. They will not lead to the change in the investment decision. So all of these factors are grouped into the component I0. Okay, I0 is called autonomous investment spending. Chi đầu tư tự định. It will change in response to the new information and event. And new information and event include all other factors we just mentioned. But normally these factors do not change, so we can assume that they are fixed as I0. The only factor can be changed frequently and can be determined by the government is the interest rate, and therefore we take this factor into account into the model. Okay. And because investment decisions have a negative relationship with the interest rate, it means higher interest rate lead to a lower investment spending. Therefore, the parameter here, B, take the positive value. So minus B, take negative value. So interest rate and investment spending has the negative relationship. Okay, so that is the second equation in our model. The third equation, the third component in our model is the government spending. Who can tell me what determines the government spending? Which factor affects the government spending of one nation? Okay. You have 1 or 2 minutes to think of, and then I will ask some of you to give the answer. Ok. Nhờ bạn tiếp theo nhé. Diệu Thúy.
Can you repeat the questions?
My question is that can you tell me some factors determining the government expenditure? The amount of government expenditure.
There are some factors that determine the government expenditures, include the size of deficit the government has?
Yes, if government have higher deficits, then what happened to expenditure?
The government expenditures will decrease.
Yes. It decrease. Okay, anything else?
I think the other factors is the unemployment rate.
How the unemployment rate affect government expenditure?
I think unemployment rate would reduce the country government expenditures.
Why?
And decrease in the government rate would decrease the tax the employee pay to the government.
So government expenditure depend on the amount of tax that the government raise from the public?
Not really.
But you just explained that higher unemployment, it means that fewer tax paid to the government, so the government had to spend less.
This is one of the factors that decrease or that affect the government expenditure.
Yes, of course, it's not all, but it means that the government tax revenue will affect the government expenditure.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. When you have a higher amount of tax, you can more easily consume. So the spending of the government would be higher. Okay. Any other factors?
I think there are other factors like inflation.
How inflation affect the government spending?
The inflation would increase the government expenditures.
Why?
I think the inflation would decrease the purchasing power of the money. So with the same amount of money we'll have for a same good, the more money of amount would need to purchase for it.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your answer. Okay, so actually the government spending is like the spending of any of us, depend on some factors. And the first factor we should mention is our income. And for the government, that is their tax revenue. Okay. If the government can collect more tax, then the government can consume more very easily. And vice versa. If they consume, collect tax less, then they should spend less. So that is the first factor affecting the government spending, the tax collection. The second factor depends on the accumulation of government debt, nợ chính phủ, government debt, public debt. If for an individual like me, if I haven't borrowed anyone, so if I want to consume more, I can borrow some of you very easily because you know that I don't borrow anyone before. So you can believe in my financial capacity. But if I already borrow a lot of people and my debt increase up to 10 billion Vietnam đồng, are you willing to lend money to me to buy so I can have money to buy something? Of course not. You don't believe in me. It is so risky. Lending money to someone who already borrowed billion of Vietnam đồng is so risky. So you will refuse to lend money to me. And if I couldn't borrow money from you, I couldn't spend. So the same for the government. If the government public debt or the government debt is small, so the government can spend more very easily by raising funds from the public. But if the government debt is very high, so it's not easy for government to raise debt more. Okay, so that is the second factor, the profile of government debt history. Another factor is the law on the government spending. And you can see in 1986, Vietnam experienced a very high inflation. When the inflation in that year, in 1986 and 1987, it reached to around 600%. Within 1 year, the price increased 6 times. Okay, sharp increase in the price level. And why? Why such inflation, such high inflation occurred in that year? It's because of the government spending policies. In that year, the government thinks that the public official, their salary is so low and their standard of living is so low, so the government decide to spend more, to pay more salary to the public official. But the government couldn't collect tax from the public because the economy is so poor. So what does the government do? They just printed more money. And they print more money and then they give this new money to the public official. And they hope that with this additional amount of money, the public official can spend more and their standard of living will go up. But that is very wrong thinking, because the amount of goods and services are unchanged. So if the public have more money, they buy more, the seller will raise the price. And soon after the policy of the government, the price increase a lot and high inflation occur. Okay, so after 1990, the government recognized that if we let the government borrow money or print money very easily, anytime the government want to spend, it can print money. It's so risky for the economy because it can lead to the inflation again. High inflation again. So to avoid that problem, the government was separated from the central bank, state bank. State bank will be responsible for printing and issuing money, but their decision, the state bank decision, will not depend on the desire of the government, the need of the government. If the government want to spend more, it couldn't ask the central bank or state bank to print money more and give money to the government. Okay, they are two separate body of the government in general, of the state in general. Okay, and it's similar to other countries in the world. The president of US couldn't ask the governor of Fed, the central bank of US, to print more money and give money to him to consume on goods and services. It's impossible. The European Central Bank couldn't be controlled by any individual government, individual prime minister. Prime Minister of Germany, Merkel, she couldn't ask the European Central Bank to print and issue more euro to the economy. The government, the spending of the German government must depend on its tax collection. It couldn't ask the central bank to print and give money to them to consume. Okay, so the law of the government also, in terms of the financing for the spending, is very important. Okay, so there are some factors affecting the government spending, tax collection, the profile of debt history, and the law regulating the printing money of the economy. Of course, we also have other factors affecting the government spending, but three factors I just mentioned are the most important ones. Okay. Okay, but once again, in our simple model, the government spending is assumed to be given, to be controlled by the policymaker. It does not depend on how much tax received. It does not depend on the law and other factors. We just assume that the government spending is given as the level that the government want it to be. Okay. So here is the aggregate expenditure. Yeah, you can see here aggregate expenditure. Total expenditure is the sum of individual spending, household spending, firm spending, and government spending. Okay, that is the aggregate expenditure. And then you can see, in order the economy is in equilibrium when the goods and service market is in equilibrium. Okay, so the goods and service market is in equilibrium when the total production denoted by Y equal total spending denoted by AE. Okay, when the total production equals the total spending, so no goods are abundant, are in excess, no shortage, no surplus, then it's quite good. Okay, so that is a equation determining the level of equilibrium income. And you just rearrange this equation, you will get the equilibrium income like this. Okay, the equilibrium income or the equilibrium output is this ratio. C0, I0, Z0, T0, and the value of MPC and the parameter B are given. We already know these factors. Okay. The only factor that is still undetermined in this equation is the interest rate. Interest rate is what we couldn't know what it is now. Okay, it depends on other sector too. Okay, but for the tax, we know how much tax the government want to collect, or the tax rate. As a abbreviation with the subscript 0, we already know, because that is the autonomous spending and is already given. Parameter MPC and B showing the relationship between the consumption and the after-tax income, the investment spending and interest rate, of course, must be given. Okay, and then you get this equation. And if you show this equation on the graph, okay, if you show this equation on the graph, it looks like this. Okay, if you show this equation on the graph, it looks like this. On the vertical axis, that is the interest rate. On the horizontal axis, that is the output or income. And then you can see the equilibrium income is negatively related to interest rates, so it slopes downward. This is a straight line equation. Okay. Okay, so that is the way we construct the IS curve. And now we can explain in more detail about this equation. From this equation, you can see that if we increase government spending or investment spending or autonomous consumption by a certain amount, for example, delta, then the right side of this equation will increase by delta over 1 minus MPC. Okay, it means that the equilibrium income will increase by that amount, delta over N1 minus MPC. Okay, yeah. Is the equation that reflects the impact of the change in the spending, autonomous spending, on the equilibrium output. And $1 increase in the household consumption or government spending will increase the output, equilibrium output, by more than $1. Why? Because MPC is smaller than 1. So 1 minus MPC greater than 0, but also smaller than 1. So its inverse should be greater than 1. So you can easily see that the output, equilibrium output, will increase more than that. You can check the formula mathematically for the tax change. You can get this formula, the second The second formula is quite simple. You can check the formula yourself. But what is the idea after this model, behind this model? Okay, behind this equation, this formula. Mathematically, it's quite easy to understand. Okay, just see the formula, you can know that. But intuitively, explain in economic sense, what does it mean? This diagram will tell you why an initial increase in the spending will lead to an increase in the output, but at a larger amount. Here, let's assume that the government expenditure increased by $1,000 for domestic product. We assume here that is a closed economy, so all the government spending will be used for, will be paid for the domestic product. For example, the government decide to construct a new road, okay, and its value equal $1,000. So what would firm do? The firm must produce more to meet the government spending, and the output of the firm will increase by exactly $1,000, equivalent to the spending of the government. Okay, and after constructing the road, the firm will receive money from the government, and therefore the income of the firm, including the owner of the firm, the labor of the firm, and other factors, owner factors of the firm, their income will increase by this amount, $1,000, that they receive from the government. But as we explained before, when we have more income, we will consume more. But we don't consume all of our additional income. We only consume a part. So the additional consumption would be equal MPC times $1,000. MPC times the additional income, okay? And it's smaller than 1,000 because MPC is smaller than 1. These people will use a part of their additional income to buy new car, new clothing, new food, go out to restaurant, and so on. And when they do so, other firms must produce more to meet their higher demand. Right? Okay, so the demand, the output will increase once again by this amount, and the firm, after producing this amount of goods to meet the additional consumption, they will get the income from this consumer. Okay, and their income will increase by the same amount, MPC times 1,000. And once again, when these people, when this firm receive money, have a higher income, their worker, their owner of the firm will have a higher income, they will consume more. And the additional consumption would be like this, MPC squared times 1,000, and so on. And this process will be repeated definitely. And at last, what is the total additional consumption and total additional production? You see that the first time, the production increased by 1,000. The second time, the output increased by 1,000 times MPC. The third time, the production will increase by 1,000 times MPC squared, and so on. And who can tell me if this process repeated indefinitely, what is the sum of this equation? Very simple for the student from mathematics faculty. Vâng, nhờ bạn để trả lời giúp nhé. Để xem chắc tương đối dễ các bạn toán này. Nhật Quang ạ.
Dạ, em thấy đáp số là 1/1 trừ MPC.
How can you get that?
I just remember.
Em có thể show cái màn hình của em giải thích cách tính không?
Em chưa kịp tính, em nhớ mang máng là vậy.
Đặc điểm của chuỗi này, số này là toán học là gì? Gọi là chuỗi gì?
Chuỗi tăng.
Đấy, một chuỗi số như thế thì gọi là trong toán là của em học là gì?
Như là chuỗi lũy thừa.
Chuỗi cấp số nhân. Geometrical series. Chuỗi cấp số nhân, geometrical series. Chuỗi cấp số nhân. Còn chuỗi cấp số gì nữa?
Chuỗi cấp số cộng.
Vâng, arithmetical series. Thế cái chuỗi sầm nhân này, cái factor nó bằng bao nhiêu ạ?
Factor nó bằng MPC.
Vâng, đúng là MPC. You can see here the second number equals the first number time MPC, the third number equals the second factor time MPC, and so on. So the factor here is MPC. And if you take 1000 outside, inside the equation is 1 plus MPC square, and so on. And this would be equal 1 minus MPC raised to n power divided by 1 minus MPC. Yeah. 1 plus MPC square, and so on. Mathematically, it equals 1 minus MPC raised to n power divided by 1 minus MPC. Okay. That is the formula to quickly calculate the sum of geometrical series. So, but in the formula, you couldn't see MPC raised to n power. Why? It only, what we have in the final formula is only 1 over 1 minus MPC. So where is MPC raised to n power?
It's raised to 0 because MPC is smaller than 1.
Exactly, it's close to 0 because MPC is smaller than 1, and therefore raised to n power, it will approach 0. Okay, therefore we have left 1 over 1 minus MPC. Okay, so that is the meaning of the formula. Mathematically, you can find out the answer very easily. Okay, let's G increase by 1000, so Y will increase by 1000 over 1 minus MPC. Very simple. But intuitively, economically, in economic sense, it can be explained in this way. Okay, sorry. It can be explained in this way. Okay. So from this analysis, you can see that if the government, if the government is increase expenditure, the total spending will increase more when MPC is large or small. Well, you can keep answering this question. When the government increase expenditure by $1,000, then the output will increase more when MPC is smaller or larger.
So the input will increase more when the MPC is larger.
Yes, exactly. It's larger, then the output will increase more. MPC larger means that the people tend to save or tend to consume when they have more income.
The MPC is large, so mean that the people will consume more when
exactly. Okay, so let me take one example, and in your opinion, which case will have a higher impact, larger impact on the spending. That is the realistic case. And you can see in 2008, the American financial crisis occurred and the economy went down. And in that year, the government want to encourage people to consume more to help the economy recover more quickly. And there are two packages of tax policies that the government implement. The first way, the government give $100 to the unemployed. Okay, who are unemployed will get $100 more from the government. The second package of policies is that the government cuts the capital tax that the stock that the investor earn from investing in stock. For example, if I invest in the stock market and after selling my stock, I earn $1,000, and the government require me to pay 20% of this additional income. It means that I have to pay $200. But now the government decides that I have to pay only $100. The government will refund or reduce the tax on me by $100. So I can keep $100 with me instead of paying to the government. So both package will lead to the spending of the government by $100. Okay. The first day the government give $100 to the unemployed. The second, the government give $100 to the capital owner, to the stock investor. And in your opinion, which package will have a larger impact on the total spending and why? Give $100 to the unemployed or give $100 to a financial investor will have a larger impact on the goods and service market. Quang, you can think for a while and give answer for my question. You understand my question?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Bạn Quang có câu trả lời được chưa? You got the answer?
Yes. So I think that the government should keep $100 to the unemployment instead of investor, because the investor will keep that $100 instead of like buying goods and stuff.
What about the unemployed? What do they do with the $100?
They will use $100 to buy goods and food or something like that.
Why you think that the financial investor will use most of the $100 to rebuy stock rather than buying goods and services?
Because they are like investor and like they have a stable income, and food not their major concern.
Yes. As you can see, thank you for your answer. As you can see, the financial investor, of course, they are more likely to be richer, to be wealthier than the unemployed. So giving $100 to a rich like financial investor and to a poor like unemployed, what would they do with their additional income? Who have a higher incentive to consume if they have additional income? Of course, that is the poor people, because the poor people now they don't have enough income to buy goods and services. They really want to consume more, but they don't have enough money, so they have to suffer in that condition. But now, if we give them more money, so they are very happy to consume more. So it means that the MPC of the poor people is higher. For the rich people, what they want to buy, they already buy. Good food, other goods and services, clothing and other. They already satisfied with what they own, with what they have now. So give them $100. They will not use that $100 for buying goods and services. And therefore, the impact on goods and services will be very small. They use most of their $100 from tax saving to save, to put in the bank account, to put in the stock market again. And therefore, the impact on the goods and service market is weaker. That is the problem. In US, some researchers have done a study to know what happened to the total spending when the government implemented these two packages. And they find that if the government give $100 to the unemployed, at last the total spending will increase to around how much? Increase to around $170. Okay, $170 from the reduction from the subsidy to the unemployed. But for the financial investor, refund them $100 of capital income tax only have increased the production, the consumption by $19. 19 compared with 170. So obviously the same amount of spending from the government, but the impact on the goods and services market is quite different. It depends on who get money from the government. The rich and the poor will have a different response to the money they receive from the government. And that is the reason why in reality, when you see the government implement the tax policy or the spending policy, they try to deliver money, this amount of spending, to the poor people. They will try to buy something that provided by the poor people. So the poor people have more income, so they will consume more, and the total impact on the spending will be larger. Okay, that is the point I want to ask to analyze in detail here. Okay, so that is ISNM equation. You can see, and now one more question. Who can tell me? Who can tell me what determines the slope of the IS curve? When the IS curve steep or when the IS curve flat? Okay. Which country tend to have a steeper IS curve? Vietnam or US? Vietnam today or Vietnam in the past? No, to Vietnam and US. It's easier for us to compare. Okay, I repeat my question. What determines the slope of the IS curve? The IS curve is flat. It means what? Okay. And the second question, which country tend to have a steeper IS curve, Vietnam or US, and why? Okay, you have 2 or 3 minutes to think of, and then I will ask some of you to give the answer. Vâng, nhờ bạn trả lời giúp nhé. Dạ, lại tua lại từ đầu vậy, hết vòng rồi. Dạ, quay lại bạn Phương Trang ạ. Okay, can you tell me what determines the slope of the IS curve? Is flat or steep? Depend on what? Or imply what?
The ES curve is a relationship between the interest and the income. So the decrease in the interest will decrease the income. So the slope downward.
Yeah, it slope downward. Okay, it's quite clear. But its slope is large or small. It means that the IS curve is steep or flat. Depend on what? We know that it's downward sloping is quite clear. But now talk more about the steepness of the curve. Is flat or steep? Depend on what?
I think it depends on the interest rate.
How? You can explain in mathematical way. It's quite simple. It's much simpler. And later we can explain in economic sense. Mathematically, when the IS curve is flat,
IS curve is flat. When the MPC is higher.
yes, MPC higher.
The ES curve is flatter.
How can you know that?
Because depend on the equation you show on the screen. The second.
Explain in more detail about the equation on the screen.
MPC is higher. MPC is higher. When the MPC is higher, 1 minus MPC is smaller.
Yes.
And B over 1 minus MPC is smaller and...
It's larger.
It's larger. And A minus B and minus B over 1 minus MPC is smaller. And so when MPC is higher, the income is smaller.
No, my question is not the income. My question is the slope of the IS curve. Is steep or flat? So mathematically, what must you know before deciding the slope of the curve? To know the curve is steep or flat, you must know what? Toán học nói một đường nó dốc hay thoải, ta phải biết cái gì ạ?
Biết được sự thay đổi của delta Y trên delta R.
Tức là cái ký hiệu gì cho biết cái điều đấy ạ? Cái khái niệm gì toàn?
Là đạo hàm ạ.
Slope coefficient, hệ số góc. Đúng không ạ? Hệ số góc cũng cho biết đường nó dốc hay thoải. So, what is the slope coefficient of the IS curve?
Là B trên 1 trừ MPC ạ?
Không phải không ạ? Chưa đúng ạ. Phương trình Y bằng I cộng B, cái nào là slope coefficient ạ?
AX cộng B thì slope coefficient là A.
Đúng rồi ạ. Thì tương tự ở đây thì slope coefficient sẽ là cái gì ạ?
Là trừ B trên 1 trừ MPC ạ?
Không phải.
Nó tựa vào biến R mà thấy.
Chưa chính xác, nó vẫn là những cái đấy thôi, nhưng viết em trả lời chính xác. Để ý cái hệ trục của nó nhé. Phương trình y bằng a cộng b và phương trình ở đây cái hệ trục của nó như thế nào thì mới trả lời chính xác được.
AX ở đây là bằng trừ B trên 1 trừ MPC nhân R.
Hệ số góc viết phương trình để viết hệ số góc ở đây nó phải là viết cái gì theo cái gì ạ? Y theo R hay R theo Y?
Viết R theo Y ạ.
Và em phải viết trục tung lên trục hoành đúng không ạ? R theo Y theo nghĩa là hệ số góc nó phải bằng mấy ạ?
Bằng 1 trừ MPC trên B ạ.
Mình đảo lại thôi không ạ? 1 trừ MPC trên B. Cái đường mà nó flatter, đường nó thoải hơn có nghĩa là hệ số góc nó sẽ phải
lớn hơn.
Thoải hơn
nó phải nhỏ hơn.
Và nhỏ hơn mà 1 trừ MPC trên B mà nhỏ hơn có nghĩa là MPC phải như nào?
MPC phải nhỏ hơn ạ.
Và MPC phải lớn hay nhỏ?
Nhỏ hơn ạ.
Một trừ MPC trên B nhỏ hơn.
Nhưng MPC phải lớn hơn ạ. Em vẫn không nhìn được cái nghịch đảo này.
Vâng, lưu ý cái nghịch đảo. Và B phải như nào ạ?
B phải lớn ạ.
Vâng. Okay, so what does larger B mean? The parameter B is larger, what does it mean?
B stay for
B stands for what? For the relationship between what and what?
the relationship between investment spending and interest.
Yes, interest rate. So B larger means that the investment spending is
larger, is smaller.
No, not smaller, but is more sensitive or less sensitive to the change in the interest rate?
Dạ thầy hỏi lại luôn ạ.
Larger B means that investment spending is more sensitive or less sensitive to a change in the interest rate?
Is more
sensitive or less sensitive? Yes, more sensitive, nhạy cảm hơn. Okay, it means that a small change in the interest rate can lead to a large change in the investment spending. Okay, so the IS curve will be flatter when the investment spending is more sensitive to the interest rate. That is the point. Okay, so in your opinion, in which country the IS curve is flatter, Vietnam or US?
Is flatter is
Vietnam or US would have a flatter IS curve.
Vietnam.
Why I think so?
Because a small change in interest will lead to em nghĩ ở Việt Nam tại vì là ảnh hưởng đến thị trường của Việt Nam sẽ lớn hơn.
em muốn trả lời Việt Nam hay Mỹ em phải dựa trên cái ý câu trước em vừa trả lời, tức là ở đất nước nào cái đầu tư nó sẽ more sensitive với cả cái lãi suất, sự thay đổi của lãi suất hơn. Em nhạy cảm hơn, em more sensitive với cái gì đó hơn khi em dùng nó nhiều ít ạ.
Khi dùng nó nhiều ạ. Ở Việt
Vâng.
Nam thì đầu tư chưa nhiều bằng ở Mỹ, cho nên là nó sensitive hơn.
Em không vay ngân hàng mấy, tức là vốn vay ngân hàng của em tương đối ít, thì lãi suất thay đổi nó có ảnh hưởng đến quyết định đầu tư của em không? Ảnh hưởng nhiều đến quyết định đầu tư của em không ạ?
Không vay mấy.
Nếu trong điều kiện bình thường là em vay không đáng kể mấy đúng không ạ? Thì việc lãi suất
Thì
tăng lên hoặc giảm xuống có ảnh hưởng làm thay đổi cái quyết định đầu tư của em nhiều không ạ?
dạ không thay đổi nhiều ạ.
Không đúng không ạ?
Vâng.
Vì đơn giản là nó có tăng lên thì cái chi phí của em tăng không đáng kể, lại chả vay mượn mấy.
Vâng.
Vậy thì quốc gia nào cái mức độ vay vốn để đầu tư nhiều hơn ạ?
Vay vốn để đầu tư nhiều hơn là Mỹ ạ.
Và nước Mỹ sử dụng tiếp cận vốn tài chính để hoạt động kinh doanh nó nhiều hơn. Thứ nhất, số doanh nghiệp nó lớn hơn này. Thứ hai là cái việc tiếp cận tài chính ngân hàng của nó cũng dễ dàng hơn ở Việt Nam. Việt Nam các bạn biết là để vay thì không phải chỉ vấn đề lãi suất, mà các doanh nghiệp vay nó cần gặp khó là vấn đề gì ạ? Cả vấn đề gì nữa? Hôm nay các bạn trả lời đấy. Tức là tiếp cận tài chính đúng không ạ? Cái financial asset đấy. Rất nhiều chúng ta biết là tại sao cái in-official market ấy, cái thị trường tín dụng phi chính thức ấy, tức là thị trường chợ đen đấy, kiểu vay nặng lãi nó phát triển. Lý do là bởi vì đi theo thị trường chính thức là không thể tiếp cận được vốn. Thằng nào vay thị trường chợ đen nghĩa nó có quan tâm đến lãi suất không ạ?
Dạ không ạ.
Không nặng nề lãi suất lắm, để nó chấp nhận vay chợ đen rồi, nó rất cần tiền thôi, chứ còn lãi suất lên cao thì nó vẫn chơi được. Thế nhưng tại sao nó không vay ngân hàng? Vay ngân hàng lãi suất rẻ hơn rất là nhiều. Lý do là bởi vì nó không cho vay. Bởi vì muốn vay được ông phải có tài sản thế chấp, mà thằng đi vay phần đông thằng đang không có tài sản nhiều mấy để vay, nhưng ông bắt nó thế chấp nó không vay được. Thì đấy là cái, có cái thủ tục vay các cái yêu cầu nó quá phức tạp đúng không ạ? Giấy tờ nhà đất để chứng minh nọ kia vân vân nhiều quá, nên là thôi nó đi ra ngoài chợ đen nó vay, và dẫn đến cái vấn đề của thị trường tín dụng đen. Nhưng ở Mỹ thì thôi thoải mái đúng không ạ? Anh chỉ cần chứng minh cái hợp đồng vay tín dụng của anh nó ổn đúng không ạ, vân vân, thế là có thể nó tiếp cận được rồi, nó không cần phải tiết tài sản thế chấp, hoặc là dùng chính khoản tiền anh vay anh mua cái gì nó dùng cái đấy làm thế chấp luôn. Ông thích vay mô tô, ok tôi cho ông vay mô tô, xong tôi lấy luôn cái giấy tờ ô tô gốc của ông, thì tôi ông cũng chả bán đi đâu, ông chỉ có sử dụng thôi. Thì đấy là cái cách tiếp cận ở nước Mỹ. Và đương nhiên ở nước Mỹ như vậy là cái việc vay mượn nó thể hiện hết ở trong lãi suất rồi. Thế nên là lãi suất mà có thay đổi thì rõ ràng là nó sẽ ảnh hưởng mạnh hơn đến Mỹ, bởi vì cái lượng vốn vay nó lớn. Còn ở Việt Nam thì cái lãi suất có thay đổi thì nó cũng không ảnh hưởng nhiều. Thì đấy là cái ý ở đây các bạn cần nhớ, tức là cái độ dốc đường ES nó phụ thuộc vào cái độ sensitivity hoặc cái độ nhạy cảm của đầu tư với lãi suất. Và ở những quốc gia mà tiếp cận vốn nó dễ dàng thì cái độ nhạy cảm của vốn với lãi suất nó sẽ lớn hơn. Còn ở những quốc gia mà có cái credit constraint, cái gọi là những cái ràng buộc về tài chính tín dụng nó tương đối chặt như ở Việt Nam, thì cái mức độ phản ứng của đầu tư với lãi suất nó không có nhiều. Tức là có thay đổi lãi suất nhưng mà đầu tư có thể người ta vẫn đầu tư như cũ. Lãi suất có lên thì người ta vẫn đầu tư như cũ, và lãi suất có giảm người ta vẫn đầu tư xem như cũ, người ta cũng không có thay đổi gì nhiều. Okay, so that is the explanation for the slope of the IS curve. And the last question, can you tell me some examples that lead to the shift of the IS curve to the right? Give me some case, some examples that lead to a shift of the IS curve to the right, or rightward shift of the IS curve. Hãy cho tôi một vài ví dụ để làm cho cái đường IS này nó dịch sang bên phải. Tương đối dễ thôi.
Can I answer this question? I have.
Yes.
So the IS curve will shift to the right when A in the formula increase, right?
Exactly.
So that we can increase A by increase the autonomous consumption, increase the autonomous investment or the government spending, or we can also do that by by increase the MPC, the marginal propensity of consuming, right?
Mm-hmm. What about tax?
Tax. We have to separate it. The tax. Let me write that down a bit. So we can do that by decrease the tax.
Yes, we decrease the tax. Okay, exactly. Thank you, Donai, for answer. Okay, so here you can see that the IS curve can shift rightward if C0, I0, Z0, and T0 go up. Okay, it will increase the intercept coefficient and the curve will shift rightward. For MPC, it appears both in the numerator and denominator. But so actually it's not easy to know as S curve will shift rightward or leftward if MPC is increased at first sight, at first see. But if you analyze in more detail, when MPC larger, it means that we tend to consume more. Consume more, it means that the spending more, so the IS curve should shift to the right. Because when we consume more, we produce more. And IS curve shift rightward, it means that the production continuously increase. So MPC go up, the IS curve will shift rightward. But at the same time, the slope of the IS curve also change. It will be flatter. Okay. So there are some factors determining when the IS curve shift rightward or leftward and determining the slope of the IS curve equation. You should remember. Next week, we will construct the NM equation, and then we can combine them IS and NM equation together, and we can identify the equilibrium, and we can analyze in more detail how policies, including fiscal and monetary, the government can affect the economy. And we can analyze in some practical examples, some practical case to see how this policy affects the real world economy. Okay. So that is all content for today's lessons. Have you got any question? Have you got any question? No question? Okay, so if you have no questions, you can see some exercise at the end of this chapter. In the page 335, you can do exercise 1, 2, and 3. Okay, 2, 1, 2, and 3 in the on page 335 at the end of the chapter 11. Okay, and you can do this, and please send me through email, of course, before next week, next Thursday. Okay, before we come to the class. Next week we will study offline at the university, not online. So please send three exercise, the answer for 3 exercise to my email before Thursday morning. Okay. Đấy, các bạn nhớ gửi cho tôi cái bài tập mà 3 cái bài tập các bạn làm 1, 2, 3 nhé, và trong hòm thư của tôi trước cái buổi thứ 5 tuần sau chúng ta học bắt đầu trực tiếp trên lớp rồi. Dạ. Ok, thế thôi. Tạm biệt cả lớp. Chúc các bạn một ngày vui vẻ.
Em thầy là bài này là bài trong sách đúng không ạ?
Bài trong sách đấy, trang 335 đấy, bài cuối chương đấy. 1, 2, 3 đấy. Dạ vâng. Bye bye các bạn.
Em chào thầy ạ.
Chào thầy.
Chào thầy ạ.